Good morning and welcome to our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Coming up today, refugees take cover from smoke and blast inside United Nations Relief and Works Agency shelter in Gaza. White House says U.S. exploring pauses in Israel-Hamas conflict. Israeli general considers admitting fuel to Gaza if hospitals run out. Thank you for joining us for this morning's coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. One Palestinian was killed and 3 were wounded during an Israeli raid on the West Bank city of Jenin on Thursday. According to Palestinian Health Ministry, which reported this, 4 injured people arrived to the hospital following the raid. Following 18 months of steadily escalating violence in the West Bank, Israeli forces have clamped down further since the October 7 attack, making hundreds of arrests and conducting regular raids that have resulted in clashes. At least 121 Palestinians have been killed there in 3 weeks since the attack. People in the UNRWA school turned shelter in northern Gaza ran for cover from smoke and blasts on Thursday. Commissioner General of the UN agency, Felipe Lazzarini, confirmed that the school was damaged and 1 child was reportedly killed. They say that the school is one of the 4 of their shelters damaged in the last 24 hours. Images of the scene were uploaded by an Instagram user called Ahmedi Jazi, who claimed the people were sheltering from white phosphorus and artillery shells. But a former commander, UK and NATO CBRN forces, Hamish de Breton Gordon, who viewed the video, dismissed claims that Israel used white phosphorus. According to him, it is possible that riot control agents are being used, but people in the vicinity of these grenades do not seem to be coughing and spluttering, as you would expect from the RCAs. The White House says it's concerned about the attacks on Israeli forces by Hezbollah as they exchange fire and violence spikes at the Lebanese border. But the national security spokesperson, Mr. John Kirby, says there is no indication that the Iran-backed group is ready to go all in with its attacks.
I think you all heard the president address this earlier today, but thanks to his leadership.
But how concerning is it that there have been consistent engagement with Israeli forces?
Obviously, we're concerned about continued attacks on Israeli forces there in the north, as are the Israelis. But I don't believe we've seen any indication yet specifically that Hezbollah is ready to go in full force, so we'll see what he has to say. We're glad to have the participation of all members of the partnership here for this summit.
Meanwhile, the White House is also exploring the idea of pauses in the Israel-Hamas conflict to help civilians in Gaza, and any such temporary pause will not stop Israel. National Security spokesperson Mr. John Kirby pointed out that this will not deter Israel from defending itself. United Nations experts called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza on Thursday, saying time was running out for Palestinian people there who find themselves at grave risk of genocide.
Do we advocate pauses by both sides here, temporary, localized, to be able to get Americans out, to be able to get aid in? You betcha we do. That doesn't mean that we're calling for a general ceasefire. Hang on a second. There's a difference. There's a big difference here. And we understand that, as I said earlier, humanitarian pauses have to be negotiated, and you have to have a credible basis for doing it in a temporary, localized way. I would also expect that we would get a lot of criticism from you and from your network and others if we just eschewed the whole idea of some sort of temporary pause so that people couldn't get out. I mean, we're doing exactly what you should be doing to try to look after these folks.
Now, the chief of Israel's armed forces is signaling willingness to ease its wartime embargo on fuel for the Gaza Strip, saying that if hospitals there run out of fuel, they could be resupplied under supervision. After being surprised by Hamas cross-border killing spree on October the 7th, Israel has besieged Gaza and waged a counter-offensive. Israel has allowed in humanitarian aid but ruled out fuel imports, citing a need to starve Hamas power generators. Hospitals in the Palestinian enclave have increasingly been raising alarm about their own electricity supplies waning, signaling that Israel was willing to escalate the war, including against Hamas allies in Lebanon and elsewhere in the region. Israeli Army Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi says the Air Force was currently bringing less than half of its capabilities to bear. He also voiced appreciation for the support of the United States, which has dispatched naval reinforcements to the region. Israeli troops and tanks held live fire drills in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Thursday. The heights were part of Syria until 1967, when Israel captured most of the area in the Six-Day War, occupying it and annexing it in 1981. The unilateral annexation was not recognized internationally, and Syria demands the return of the territory. Israel's government says it also fears that Iran, an ally of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, is seeking to establish itself permanently on the Syrian side of the border in order to launch attacks on Israel. The president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, who is this week confirmed Israeli military's air bombardment of Gaza and recalled his envoy to Israel, expressed his concerns during a meeting with President Joe Biden. Mr. Boric condemned the October 7 attack on Israel by Hamas and called for the release of Israeli hostages, but added that Israel's retaliatory bombardment of Gaza is disproportionate and violating international law. President Biden is facing mounting pressure abroad and at home for failing to call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war, although the White House is now backing a series of pauses in the fighting to allow people to exit Gaza and aid to flow in.
Nuestra preocupación por lo que está ocurriendo hoy día en la franja de Gaza.
U.S. House of Representatives says passed a Republican plan to provide $14.3 billion in aid to Israel as it fights Hamas. Despite Democrats' insistence it has no future in the Senate and the White House's promises of a veto, the measure passed 226 to 196, largely along party lines, with most Republicans supporting the bill and most Democrats objecting the bill. Now, the bill's introduction is the first major legislative action under new Republican Speaker Mr. Mike Johnson. President Joe Biden has threatened a veto, and Senator Chuck Schumer, majority leader of the Democratic-controlled Senate, said he will not bring it up for vote. President Biden has asked Congress to approve a broader $106 billion emergency spending package, including funding for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine, as well as humanitarian aid.
On this vote, the yeas are 226, the nays are 196.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has given assurances that the United States will not seek to impose any conditions on the support it gives Israel to defend itself in the wake of the Hamas October 7 attacks. Mr. Harris made the comments at a news conference in Britain following the conclusion of the Safety Summit. Mrs. Harris, that is. Israel's ensuing bombardment of the small Palestinian enclave of 2.3 million has killed, at least according to Hamas, 9,061 people.
We are going to continue to stand with Israel's right to defend itself. And let's be clear and never forget what happened on October 7th, where hundreds, thousands, 1,400 innocent people were killed, slaughtered. Young people who were simply attending a concert. And so we are not going to create any conditions on the support that we are giving Israel to defend itself. I have seen, as you have, I'm sure, the images, the photographs of the loss of civilian life in Gaza, and it is heartbreaking. The injury and death to children. I have a friend who I talked with recently who has family in Gaza and has lost a number of the members of her family, innocent civilians. So let me start by saying that it is absolutely tragic when there is ever anywhere any loss of innocent life, of innocent civilians, of children. And there is no word that I can offer you that that justifies any other feeling in terms of the loss of that life. It's tragic.
Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Now let's have a conversation with a former National Security Advisor of Israel, who was also a Deputy Director of Mossad, Mr. Ilan Mizrael. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us in what is a very difficult time for you, obviously, and the people of Israel. Let's begin with the hostage situation that is still an active one in Gaza. Names like Ofer, Ravid, Starosta, Ran, Rom, Sharon, Sharona, Sharon, names like Kiffer, the 9-month-old baby that was taken hostage by Hamas, are the names of just some of these over 239 hostages in Gaza as we speak. How is Israel, or what is your view of Israel's strategy to recover these hostages and at the same time maintain its pristine commitments to a ground incursion?
I think both channels can go together. One channel is, as it was in the past, there are diplomatic, the diplomatic channel. I just read that the ex-head of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, came back from Qatar, trying to check the possibility that they will push forward the release of our abducted children, women, and men and soldiers. And the other channel will be keep going in the ground offensive. And the ground offensive, in my point of view, will have much more pressure on the Hamas Daesh organization to free our abducted people, and at the same time will give us opportunities to free them by ourselves in the and with our army.
The families of the abducted, the hostages, have been seeking a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, expressing a concern that the airstrikes and the bombardments and now the tank incursion will put their families at risk.
It might be that they will be at risk. They are at risk from the moment of the 7th of October. They are at risk, and now they are at risk in Gaza. Yes, they might be at risk, but at the same time, as I said before, the ground offensive gives us opportunities, and the pressure on the Hamas Daesh organization is being greater and greater, and I think that it will push them to start the dialogue in order to free our abducted men, women, and children.
Mr. Misrael, has Hamas given any indication to the Israeli government what their purpose is with the keeping of the hostages? What is their objective?
The objective of what? Of whom?
Of Hamas, for keeping the hostages, for taking a 9-month-old baby and all the children that they took, as well as everyone that they took.
You know, we can quote papers and interrogation of those from Hamas terrorists who are in prison now after the 7th October. And we have a very, very clear picture of what was their task. They were instructed not only to kill and abduct prisoners. The issue was do it savagely in order that the Israeli population and the Israeli army, when they will start their offensive campaign, they will be afraid because they will see our atrocities. They are saying openly in some TV broadcasting here that this what they did because this was their instruction they received from their military commanders. They say that they know that what they have done is against Islam laws, but they say we had to be obedient to our military commanders. So the issue was to show the strength, to show and to make the Israeli population and the Israeli soldier, they were sure, they still thinking that what we saw, horrible, horrifying situation there, that it will affect our ground forces.
Does Israel negotiate with terrorists? What's your policy?
In the past, we negotiated with the terrorists. Me personally, I think it was a mistake. You never negotiate with the terrorists. Usually it was that they had 1, 2, 3 prisoners, Israeli prisoners, and they were demanding that we will release really. For the last negotiation, we received back 1 soldier and they demanded 1,000 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. With them, they also demanded the release of Arab-Israeli heads of crime gangs. And they asked for this. And after a long negotiation, unfortunately, they received it. And now everyone understands that it was a mistake, a big mistake, because part of those 1,000 who were released are now in the commanders. One of them, Sinwar, is the head of Hamas Nazi organization.
There's a video making the rounds on some fora of Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas, saying that he's given Israel a 4-point offer, and that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is deceiving the Israeli people. One of the points of that offer was that a ceasefire should be called, a humanitarian ceasefire should be called, and there are 3 other points. Have you heard of this?
The first time I heard that that Haniyeh is pushing forward 4 points of negotiation. No, the first one you said ceasefire. In my point of view, and I hope that there will not be a ceasefire, because ceasefire is to strengthen the Hamas. No, they have. I think that the policy should be that the campaign, the ground campaign, should continue as it started, until we will be able to make a huge damage to the organization, the Hamas organization, and I hope also to catch the Sinwar and Muhammad Def, which are the real leadership of Hamas. The other one, Haniya and the others, are in 7-star hotels in Dubai, while their people are in Gaza. Yes, part of them are suffering.
You understand that Haniya is in Qatar?
Sorry, yes, he's in Qatar.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where they are, because in my point of view, we have to follow them wherever they will be on the globe.
But one of your biggest allies, your greatest ally, the United States, says they're looking at calling for a humanitarian pause. What is your concern about the civilian casualties in Gaza? According to the health ministry in Gaza, about 8,000 people now have lost their lives. And many of them are children. And you know, the argument is that if the children in Israel are valuable, which of course every human life is, then the children and the people in Gaza, the civilians who possibly do not even support Hamas, or maybe they do or maybe they don't, but they're not the Hamas targets, they're not the military targets of the IDF, that those very same people are dying.
The nation of Gaza Strip is not the military target. They are not at all. We are fighting Hamas. Now, when there is a war, unfortunately, you will have also a part of the population that will be hurt. It was in all over history, that's what happened. World War II, you had in Great Britain hundreds of thousands of civilian casualties. At the same time, it was in the opposite side, which is Nazi Germany. So it happens every time there is a war, but they are not our target. We are not targeting the population and of course not the children. Before starting the ground campaign, we were notifying the population to leave north of Gaza and to go south, because we are going to start our ground campaign. Part of them did it. Other part is staying, although we want them to leave because we are coming. Another part is prevented from going south because the Hamas is not allowing them to do it. They are using the population to be human shields. This is what they are doing. When they are using their population as human shield, or when they do not allow them to go to safe place, which is south of Gaza, and there is a war, unfortunately, population is suffering. But we are not targeting population.
Can you confirm?
They were targeting our population. They entered in the 7th of October to our cities and our kibbutzim, shooting, assassinating, decapitating babies, burning. I will show you, if you want, a picture in which a mother holding her baby, but they were burned alive. What you see, you will see just a kind of a statue, a black statue of a woman with a baby in her arms, raping women while their husbands or children are watching, and then killing them. So these atrocities, no one can make comparison between what they did to our civilian population as a target. and to what is going on in Gaza when we are doing our best not to hurt the population, the Gazian population. And as I mentioned before, the captives here in Israel, the Hamas terrorists, were caught during the campaign. They said, we know that what we did is against the laws of Islam, but our commanders ordered us, and we did what the commanders ordered us, which means killing babies, killing women, raping, and all the other atrocities. This is a huge comparison. This is one thing. The second thing, numbers are changing. Yesterday they say 9,000. Today they are saying 8,000. I'm very sorry, but I do not trust these numbers, because when their hospital was hurt by a rocket, which the other Islamic organization in Gaza launched, they say that they had 500 civilians they were killed in this bombardment. While we know for sure, after making a long and very professional work to know exactly what happened there, and we have another number which is 50. So they add 10 from 50 to 500. So I'm sorry, I cannot trust their numbers as a true, let's say, source of giving information.
As much as Israel has allies in the UK and in the US and Australia and other nations, Bolivia has recalled its envoy to Israel. The president of Chile has followed suit, recalling their envoy to Israel, citing that there's a humanitarian disaster caused by Israel in the Gaza Strip. And you've heard the criticism of the Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan criticizing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and refusing to describe Hamas as a terrorist organization. What's your impression of how the international community is handling this war vis-a-vis the job of the United Nations?
The United Nations, for me, is unreliable organization. If the UN, if I'm not mistaken, last week or 10 days ago, they were against, or they were for also big powers like Russia, China, and others. They were ready to receive a decision in which they have to see the Israeli side as the aggressor one. And they didn't mention even the atrocities of the 7th of October. For me, this organization is an organization that I cannot trust, and it is historically anti-Israeli. Leave the UN aside. Let's talk about the Russian and Chinese that are talking about our atrocities and the situation of the Palestinian people in Gaza. I mentioned before, they can come and to talk with us about that. See what the Russians did in Georgia. Chinese, what they are doing to their Palestinians, to their Islamic Chinese at the north. So I don't know. I cannot treat seriously those who are condemning Israel. Let them first of all make the right thing in their countries. It is this conflict, I have to mention that this conflict is not only Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's also a conflict between Russia and the United States. The Russians are involved here. just 2 weeks ago, they invite the leadership of Hamas to Moscow. We found in the kibbutzim in the 7th of October weapon that Wagner gang is using, and they are Russians, if I'm not mistaken. So the issue is also how to make, how to back Iranians policy, how to back Hezbollah, and how to back Hamas. If you will pay attention here, you have as if Russia, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is a kind of an axis now, unfortunately, trying to in their conflict with the US, using them in order to put a finger on the eye of the Americans, in order to show to President Biden that in the coming elections he will have problem, because look what you are on the side of the Israelis, and by that also brings Middle East countries to feel more sympathy to the Russian axis, which is not going on. Yes, in Jordan, in Egypt, in other Arab and Muslim countries, there are masses who are against Israel, because unfortunately these masses are do not care about what happened in the 7th of October, and it will never happen again. But Hamas, just yesterday, a leader of Hamas said, we did it once, but we will have 7th of October the second time, the third time, and the fourth time. When another leader was asked, why did you, with all the money you received, you build tunnels? Why didn't you build shelters for your population? The answer was, the tunnels are for us, for Hamas. Shelters for the population, this is the business of the UN and of Israel. It's unbelievable to listen. Hamas is a government. They are ruling Gaza like a state. Their responsibility is to take care of their population. And here you have Hamas leaders who are saying publicly, we are taking care of Hamas, not of our population. This is also an answer to your questions about what's going on there, humanitarian corridors that we agree. You have almost every day, you have lorries are coming from the south, from Egypt, checked by Egyptians and by Israel, and then into the Gaza Strip.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there now. We thank you. It's a very, very incredible what the Hamas individual said that you just recounted. It's almost unbelievable, but it happens to be fact. And we thank you for coming on the program. We hope to bring you on again at another juncture. We've been speaking with the former National Security Advisor of Israel, who was also a Deputy Director of Mossad, Mr. Ilan Mizrael. Thank you for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Still ahead, U.S. President Joe Biden affirms 74 dual citizens leave Gaza. You're watching Israel-Hamas War on Channels Television. The United States has been able to get 74 dual citizens out of Gaza. U.S. President Joe Biden announced this at the White House yesterday, one day after evacuees began crossing into Egypt. Hundreds of people attended a solidarity rally for Palestinians in Pakistan's biggest city of Karachi. The protesters waved flags of Palestine and Jamia Tulema Islam Fasil, an Islamic party that organized the rally. The protesters chanted, "Any friend of Israel is a traitor," and "Down with Israel." Elsewhere in France, hundreds of demonstrators held a vigil in support of Palestinians in Gaza who face continued bombardment from Israel. On the French capital's Place de la République square, around 300 demonstrators held plastic candles, waved Palestinian flags, and chanted slogans in support of Gazans. Israel began its most intensive ever bombardment of the Gaza Strip, a 45-kilometer-long enclave and home to 2.3 million people, after the militant terrorist Palestinian group Hamas broke through the border on October the 7th, according to health authorities of Hamas-run Gaza. Out of 9,061 people killed, 3,760 are children, and 2,326 are women, according to the health ministry. The United Nations welcomed the continued movement of people and humanitarian aid through the Rafah crossing after wrangling over procedure for inspecting the aid, and bombardments on the Gaza side of the border had left relief materials stranded in Egypt. People hoping to leave the Gaza Strip converged on the Rafah crossing to Egypt on Thursday, with those whose names were on a list vetted by Israel gradually passing through, while others held up their foreign passports in vain. The crossing was open for limited evacuations for a second day under a Qatar-brokered deal between Israel, Egypt, Hamas, and the United States, aimed at letting some foreign passport holders and their dependents and some wounded Gazans out of the besieged enclave.
The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports yesterday 10 trucks carrying water, food, and medicines entered Gaza through Rafah crossing, bringing the total number of trucks to 227 since October 21. The entry of fuel, the Turkish, and also just to say, the Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital in Gaza City reportedly ran out of fuel yesterday and was forced to stop most of its activities, rendering 70 cancer patients at serious risks. Meanwhile, Gaza's telecommunications and internet services were cut for about 80 hours yesterday, leaving civilians in grave danger amid heavy Israeli bombardment from air and land. The hospital I just mentioned proactively about the issue regarding cancer patients because they had run out of fuel. I think this just only underscores a tragic humanitarian situation, the need for us to be allowed to get fuel in, and also the fact that you cannot, hospitals cannot be evacuated and moved. I mean, you have, whether it's people on dialysis, whether it's people in neonatal units, children in neonatal units, that just cannot happen. And it also yet another reminder of the fact that hospitals cannot be part of any combat.
We now speak to a military strategist and a former commander, 4 Mechanized Brigade, Benin City, Major General Pat Akim-Venga. Retired Major General Akim-Venga was also a commander, 4 and 9 brigades, commander, Special Task Force in Plateau, and Provost Marshal in the Army. We're pleased to have him physically in the studios with us. Good morning, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you. Let's begin with the multidimensional aspect of which is becoming and may become a multidimensional. We can say it's buy or try at this time of Israel and the forces that they're facing. The campaign against Hamas in Gaza, the attack by Hezbollah in the northern parts of the country, which it's increasing more and more every day. We understand that there's more attacks and there are more rockets being fired, anti-tank missiles being fired into Israel from the northern axis of the country. Do you think that this will blow up to be a more engaged war with Hezbollah? Do you think Hezbollah are biding their time to do something more sinister?
Yeah, thanks. It's a little bit dicey. You will recall that in the Six-Day War, Israel went against 5 nations. So from the perspective of Israel, they've always suspected that something like this can happen. And from the military point of view and preparations, they are ready. In other words, they can fight 2, 3 wars at the same time, given the support they get from US and given their capabilities. Hezbollah wants to do something, but they are being careful because Israel is going to cause so much damage. I know Lebanon is made up of two major parts: the Christian part, the Muslim part, and the Christians normally do not want the kind of damage that is inflicted upon the nation as a result of activities of Hezbollah.
The infrastructure.
Yeah, because Israel is going to wreak havoc in the air, from the air. They will destroy a whole lot of things. It will be devastating. So Hezbollah is doing some probing attacks here and there, receiving responses from Israel, but they've not crossed the threshold. But that doesn't mean they may not. See, because anytime you see the hand of Hezbollah, you are seeing the hand of Iran. Iran does not want an open confrontation with Israel that is direct. So they use Hezbollah. So yeah, if it is not carefully handled, it can become a whole new theater of operation on planet Earth. So basically, that's it.
How does Israel minimize civilian casualties in Gaza?
It's very challenging. See, because Hamas normally will insert itself within, knowing that it will attract attacks and that the international community will complain. For instance, the last devastating missile attack that killed so many people was because of one individual who is pivotal to the attacks on Israel. He was hiding there, and then underneath with tunnels and activities going on. So Israel calculated. Well, these guys, when they came against us on the 7th of October, they were not careful to handle only military people. They took on everybody. So if they are hiding, you see, in international in the law of war, once active participants of the nature of Hamas embed themselves in facilities that otherwise would have been forbidden targets, those targets become legitimate targets. So that is what happened.
But how can a hospital be a legitimate target? The Israeli Defense Forces they've shown proof that the Al-Shifa hospital is used as a cover for one of the bases, or maybe even the command center of Hamas in Gaza.
So that is the point I'm making. Yeah. In international humanitarian law, or the law of armed conflict, once you begin to fire from either a religious organization or facility or a hospital that otherwise wouldn't have been a legitimate target, it turns it into a legitimate target. The only parameters and considerations are that you must be careful in taking out the target, the military target that has embedded itself within the facility. But under the circumstances, Israel just did the best they could do under the circumstances. So once you fire from a hospital, once you are hiding in a hospital and firing, that hospital becomes a legitimate target. The only restriction is that the amount of force you bring to bear should be proportional to the threat such target poses.
But does a humanitarian pause or ceasefire, if called for the purposes of the civilian population in Gaza, will that really put a dent in the offensive of Israel to get Hamas, as the Israelis are saying? Will it really affect and give Hamas an upper hand? They say that it will mean that Hamas gets an upper hand.
Yeah, because it has happened many times in the past. So Israel has learned from those kind of experiences, where you give a pause and then Hamas comes takes advantage of that. You see, this thing was well calculated. We will do this, we will attack, we will capture hostages, and then Israel will respond. And normally responses from Israel normally will attract more commentary and criticism than what Hamas does. So, because when you have a nation fighting against a small religious, fundamentalist religious organization like Hamas is, and then there are civilians involved, of course, you will have criticism coming from wherever. So they always feel that pressure will be brought to bear on Israel in such a manner that will make Israel to draw back. But Israel, from a military perspective and from a strategic point of view, is calculating that the damage that was done on 7th of October was so massive that if the retaliation or the reprisal responses are not deep and enduring and effective enough, that it could happen many more times. And so you see, when you hear the US saying they should defend themselves, and you hear many European countries saying Israel has a responsibility to defend itself, it was because of the horrific nature of what Hamas did. Hamas calculated that Israel will respond and this kind of criticism will come and then there will be a pause. But it's not happening because Israel feels that if we do not see this to its end, it will happen again. And again, you see, Netanyahu's administration is facing an existential threat. If he survives this, I'll be very, very surprised if Netanyahu survives this. Because even Biden is speaking to him and talking about the next administration.
Yes, the subterranean nature of the Hamas underground complex and its vastness and the tunnel structure makes the enterprise of trying to extricate Hamas or destroy Hamas a more daunting one.
Yeah.
What sort of military strategy do you think that they are employing to get this done? Israel
has incredible intelligence assets. Why we are so surprised this happened, and I am not surprised because there was a lot of distraction. Netanyahu, in order to help himself, to prevent himself from going to prison, started a kind of war against the Supreme Court, and the Israeli society was divided. The political nature of it divided the society in such a way that the attention was taken away. And again, Hamas, instead of using mobile phones like they used to do to communicate, did a network of land telephones in the tunnels, so they were communicating in such a way that eavesdropping by Israel assets couldn't capture what they were doing. So basically what is happening here is, in this kind of war that Israel ordinarily is good at, instead of going in full scale that like they used to do, just do an invasion that is massive. They are doing piecemeal, intelligent, targeted operations, and then using technologies to determine the tunnels, where they go, who is underneath, and all that. So that is why you see that it's going gradually and very carefully. It's being carefully executed. So basically, that is why it's happening. They will keep using their intelligence assets. Look, the guys are good. The only hindrance Israel as a nation has is population. Otherwise, their armed forces will be rated higher than they are now. Now they rate them around the 20th best. It's not even close. If they had a population, they will be among the, let's say, second, third. They are very good militarily, very, very good. So, and they are used to this kind of warfare. But
if they're so good, and we spoke to a former Mossad director, if they're so good, then why the dropping of the ball in the, you mentioned that possibly they couldn't eavesdrop on conversations, but there were other red flags that were reported, such as training in plain sight.
Yeah,
and it wasn't deciphered as a terrorist attack when you have
when you have a conflict that has been going on for this long, people lose interest. After some time, so the enemy exploited a law in interest and commitment. And again, like I said, the nation was distracted. It was demonstrations here, demonstrations there. Netanyahu took his eyes off the ball. It got to the point where even reserves were saying, we are not going to fight any war if he comes. We're not going to be mobilized. Because of what Netanyahu is doing, we're not going to mobilize. It was because of the horrific nature of the attacks that they said, okay, we're going to put this aside because this attack is too obnoxious, it's too horrific that we cannot implement what we had planned. They had planned that if they were caught into conflict, they were not going to respond because of what Netanyahu was doing. That's why I'm telling you that when this conflict is over, he has to resign.
Israel has been accused of, Israel has been accused of using white phosphorus bombs against structures in Gaza.
Okay, without holding brief for the Israelis,
yes,
because I don't want to be seen as holding brief for the Israelis. But see, anything that comes out of Hamas, I take it with a pinch of salt. Anything that comes out of Hamas is normally I would take it with a pinch of salt. You see, because in war, the first casualty is normally truth. Truth is normally the first casualty. And then if it is coming from Hamas, unless a third party, and you see the challenge with the conflict involving Israel is that organizations that ordinarily before, look at the UN for instance, the UN was instrumental in bringing this nation into existence. But since that vote that brought Israel into existence, UN has been basically against the nation. So if it comes from UN, I won't take it seriously.
Okay.
But if it comes from credible sources, then I will say yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. We hope to bring you on again at another juncture on the program when we have more time. Thank you so much for being with us and expressing your views and your insight. Major General Pat Akinvinga, military strategist, former commander of 4th Mechanized Brigade, Benin City.
Thank you so much.
Personally in the studio. Many thanks.
Thanks.
That's where we leave it for today's coverage of Israel-Hamas war. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Thank you for watching.